The maintenance bay of the Galactic Academy buzzed with the usual sounds of learning. Students from dozens of different species worked at their stations, trying to master the basics of starship repair. The air smelled of metal polish and electrical components, mixed with the various scents that different alien species carried with them. Marcus Chen wiped grease from his hands as he watched the young human student, Jake Morrison, struggle with a plasma conduit. The kid was only 17, fresh from Earth's colonies, and still adjusting to life among the stars. Marcus had been working as a maintenance supervisor at the Academy for 3 years now, ever since he left the Earth Defense Corps. He preferred the quiet work of fixing things to the chaos of military life. "Easy there, Jake," Marcus said, walking over to the boy's workstation. "You're forcing it. Plasma conduits need a gentle touch." Jake looked up, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature of the bay. "I can't get the alignment right, sir. Every time I think I have it, the readings go crazy." Marcus smiled and took the calibration tool from Jake's hands. With practiced movements, he adjusted the conduit's position. The readings immediately stabilized. "See? Sometimes the old ways work best. Your grandfather would have known that trick." Jake's face lit up at the mention of his grandfather. "Grandpa always said humans had good instincts for fixing things. He used to tell me stories about when he trained the Emperor's elite guard. Said they couldn't figure out half the equipment until he showed them." The conversation caught the attention of nearby students. A group of Zephyrians, tall blue-skinned humanoids known for their pride, stopped their work to listen. Their instructor, Professor Kethvar, also turned toward Jake's station. The Zephyrian's 4 eyes narrowed as he heard Jake's words. "What did you say, human?" Kethvar asked, his voice carrying the typical arrogance of his species. Jake, unaware of the danger in the professor's tone, repeated his statement with enthusiasm. "My grandfather trained the Emperor's elite guard back in the day. Taught them everything about maintaining their battle armor and weapons systems." The maintenance bay fell silent. Even the humming of the equipment seemed to quiet down. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He knew about the Emperor's elite guard. They were legendary warriors from the height of the Galactic Empire, 2 centuries ago. They were also exclusively Zephyrian. Kethvar stepped closer to Jake's workstation. His tall frame cast a shadow over the young human. "You dare claim that a human, a primitive species that barely crawled out of its gravity well 50 years ago, trained the most elite warriors in galactic history?" Jake looked confused by the professor's anger. "I'm not claiming anything. It's just what my grandfather told me." His name was Samuel Morrison, and he dashed silence. Kethvar's voice boomed through the bay. "You insult the memory of the elite guard with your lies. No human has ever been worthy to stand in their presence, let alone train them." Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Jake and the angry professor. "Professor, I think there might be a misunderstanding here. The kid's just sharing a family story." "Stay out of this, mechanic," Kethvar snarled. "This whelp needs to learn respect for his betters." The Zephyrian students had formed a circle around Jake's station now. Their expression showed a mixture of anger and contempt. Marcus recognized the signs. This was about more than just Jake's story. The Zephyrians had never accepted humanity's rapid rise in galactic society. To them, humans were upstart newcomers who didn't know their place. Jake, meanwhile, was growing red in the face. "I'm not lying. My grandfather really did serve with the elite guard. He had medals and everything." "Metals can be forged," one of the Zephyrian students said with a sneer. "Humans are known for their deception." "That's enough," Marcus said firmly. He could see where this was heading, and he didn't like it. "Jake, maybe you should head back to your dormitory for today." But it was too late. Professor Kethvar had reached the limit of his patience. His hand shot out faster than Marcus could react, striking Jake across the face with enough force to knock the teenager to the ground. The sound of the blow echoed through the suddenly silent maintenance bay. "Learn your place, human," Kethvar said coldly. "And learn not to dishonor your betters with your fantasies." Jake lay on the floor, holding his cheek where a dark bruise was already forming. Tears of pain and humiliation filled his eyes. The other students watched in shocked silence. Even the Zephyrians seemed surprised by their professor's violence. Marcus felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. He looked down at Jake, then up at Kethvar. The professor stood over the fallen teenager with a satisfied expression, as if he had just corrected a minor error in a lesson plan. "Did you just strike my student?" Marcus asked quietly. Kethvar turned to face him. "I disciplined an insolent child. Something his human instructors clearly failed to do." Marcus knelt down and helped Jake to his feet. The boy was shaking, more from shock than pain. Marcus could feel the anger building inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had learned long ago that anger without control was useless. "Jake," he said gently, "go to the medical bay and have them look at that bruise. Then, report this incident to the academy administration." "But, Sir," Jake started. "Go. Now." Marcus's tone left no room for argument. Jake nodded and gathered his tools with shaking hands. As he walked toward the exit, several of the non-Zephyrian students followed him, offering quiet words of support. The Zephyrians remained in their circle, watching Marcus with predatory interest. Once Jake was gone, Marcus turned back to Professor Kethvar. The Zephyrian was a full head taller than him, with the lean muscle that came from growing up in heavy gravity. His four eyes gleamed with barely contained aggression. "You have something to say, mechanic?" Kethvar asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the alien professor. In his years with the Earth Defense Corps, he had learned to read threats and assess situations. Right now, he was calculating odds and consequences. "Yeah," Marcus said finally. "I have something to say." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, his communicator. With deliberate movements, he activated its recording function and set it on the nearby workbench where everyone could see it. "For the record," Marcus said clearly, "Professor Kethvar of the Zephyrian Cultural Studies Department just struck a human student named Jake Morrison for sharing a story about his grandfather's military service. The blow was unprovoked and delivered with sufficient force to cause injury." Kethvar's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "Creating evidence," Marcus replied. "See, where I come from, we have rules about adults hitting children. We also have rules about investigating claims before dismissing them." He pulled out another device, a datapad, and began accessing the Academy's historical records. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he searched through military service records, cross-referencing names and dates. "Samuel Morrison," Marcus read aloud. "Served in the Earth Defense Corps from 2387 to 2419. Attached to Imperial Guard Training Division from 2395 to 2401. Specialty, Advanced Weapons Maintenance and Tactical Equipment Repair." The maintenance bay was completely silent now. Even the Zephyrian students had stopped their threatening postures to listen. Professor Kethvar's confident expression began to waver. Marcus continued reading. Commendations include excellence in cross-species training, innovation in field repair techniques, and... He paused for dramatic effect. The Imperial Star of Merit, awarded personally by Emperor Zenthe K for training the Elite Guard in advanced combat maintenance protocols. The datapad screen showed an official photograph from the Imperial Archives. It depicted a young human man in military uniform standing beside Emperor Zenthe K himself. The Emperor was presenting the human with a ceremonial weapon, the highest honor that could be bestowed upon a non-Zephyrian. Professor Kethvar stared at the image, his four eyes wide with shock. The Zephyrian students exchanged uncertain glances. One of them stepped forward to get a better look at the datapad. This cannot be accurate," Kethvar stammered. "Official Imperial records," Marcus said calmly. "Backed up in 17 different archives across the galaxy. Samuel Morrison didn't just train the Elite Guard, he revolutionized their equipment maintenance protocols. Half the techniques they used for the next century came from his innovations." He scrolled through more records, finding additional details. According to this, he was specifically requested by the Emperor after human mechanics proved they could repair Zephyrian battle armor in half the time it took anyone else. "Seems your Elite Guard had been struggling with equipment failures for years before the humans arrived." The implications hit Professor Kethvar like a physical blow. Not only had he struck an innocent student, but he had done so while denying historical fact. Worse, he had done it in front of witnesses, and it was now being recorded for official review. "The boy was boasting," Kethvar said weakly. "The boy was sharing family history," Marcus corrected. "Accurate family history, as it turns out." He picked up his communicator and ended the recording. History that you could have verified in about 30 seconds if you had bothered to check before attacking a child. The maintenance bay remained silent as Marcus gathered Jake's scattered tools and began organizing them properly. He could feel the eyes of every student and several other instructors who had arrived during the confrontation. Word traveled fast in the academy, and incidents like this drew crowds. "Now," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command, "here's what's going to happen. Professor Kethvar is going to accompany me to the Academy Administration Office, where we're going to file a full report of this incident. The Zephyrian students are going to return to their assigned exercises. And everyone else is going to remember that before you dismiss someone's claims, you might want to actually investigate them." Professor Kethvar opened his mouth to object, but Marcus cut him off. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer to explain to the Academy Board why you assaulted a student based on your own ignorance of historical fact. I'm sure they'd be very interested in that conversation." The Zephyrian professor's shoulders sagged in defeat. He had no choice now but to follow Marcus to the administration office and face the consequences of his actions. The recording would be submitted as evidence, and the Academy took incidents of violence against students very seriously. As they walked through the corridors toward the administrative section, Marcus found himself thinking about Jake Morrison and his grandfather Samuel. The kid had been telling the truth all along, and he had been punished for it by someone who should have known better. The Academy Administration Office was located in the central tower of the facility, with large windows overlooking the training grounds below. Marcus could see students from various species engaged in combat exercises, technical training, and cultural exchange programs. The Academy was supposed to be a place where different species learned to work together, not where prejudice and ignorance were allowed to flourish. Administrator Valterra, a distinguished Centaurian with silver fur and wise eyes, looked up from her desk as Marcus and Professor Kethvar entered. She had been running the academy for over a decade and had seen almost every type of incident possible. "Mr. Chen," she said, noting the grim expression on Marcus's face. "I take it this isn't a social visit." "I'm afraid not, Administrator," Marcus replied. He placed his communicator on her desk and activated the recording he had made. "I need to file a formal complaint regarding an assault on one of my students." As the recording played, Administrator Valterra's expression grew increasingly grave. Her large eyes fixed on Professor Kethvar, who stood rigidly beside Marcus, his own gaze fixed on the floor. When the recording ended, the office fell silent except for the soft humming of the environmental systems. Administrator Valterra leaned back in her chair and regarded both men carefully. "Professor Kethvar," she said finally, "do you have any response to this recording?" The Zephyrian professor straightened slightly. The human student was being disrespectful and spreading misinformation about historical facts that you failed to verify before taking action, Administrator Valterra interrupted. "Mr. Chen, I assume you have documentation to support young Mr. Morrison's claims?" Marcus handed over his datapad, which still displayed Samuel Morrison's service records. The administrator reviewed the information carefully, occasionally cross-referencing details with her own terminal. "These records are quite clear," she said after several minutes. Samuel Morrison was indeed a distinguished member of the Earth Defense Corps who served with great honor in training the Imperial Elite Guard. His innovations in equipment maintenance are still taught in military academies today. She turned to Professor Kethvar with a stern expression. "You struck a student for telling the truth about his family's military service. Moreover, you did so based on racial prejudice rather than factual knowledge. This is completely unacceptable behavior for an academy instructor." Professor Kethvar's four eyes darted nervously between the administrator and Marcus. I was not aware of the historical accuracy of the student's claims. However, his manner was disrespectful. His manner was that of a young person proud of his grandfather's achievements, Administrator Valterra said sharply. Which, given the significance of those achievements, was entirely appropriate. She activated her own recording device and began speaking in an official tone. "Let the record show that on this date, Professor Kethvar of the Zephyrian Cultural Studies Department committed assault against human student Jake Morrison, age 17, during a maintenance bay exercise. The assault was unprovoked and, based on the instructor's refusal to believe accurate historical information regarding the student's family military service." Marcus watched as the full weight of the situation settled on Professor Kethvar. Assault charges against a minor would likely end his career at the academy and could result in criminal prosecution depending on how far the administration decided to pursue the matter. Mr. Chen, Administrator Velterra continued, please ensure that Mr. Morrison receives a full medical examination and psychological evaluation. Any necessary treatment will be provided at academy expense. Also, please compile a complete report of the incident for submission to the Galactic Education Council. She turned back to Professor Kethvar. You are hereby suspended from all teaching duties pending a full investigation. Security will escort you to your quarters, where you will remain until the investigation is complete. You are forbidden from contacting Mr. Morrison or any witnesses to this incident. The Zephyrian professor's proud demeanor finally cracked. Administrator, surely we can resolve this matter internally. There is no need to involve outside authorities, the decision has been made, Administrator Velterra said firmly. When you chose to strike a student, you made this a legal matter, not just an internal disciplinary issue. She pressed a button on her desk, and, within moments, 2 academy security officers arrived. They were professional but firm as they flanked Professor Kethvar. Escort Professor Kethvar to his quarters and ensure he understands the terms of his suspension, Administrator Velterra instructed. As the security officers led the disgraced professor from the office, Marcus felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice was being served, but the incident never should have happened in the first place. Mr. Chen, Administrator Velterra said once they were alone, I want to thank you for handling this situation professionally. Your quick thinking in documenting the incident and researching the historical facts prevented this from becoming an even larger problem. Marcus nodded. Jake's a good kid. He didn't deserve what happened to him. No, he did not, the administrator agreed. I'm also concerned about the broader implications of this incident. If one of our instructors can display such obvious prejudice against humans, we may have similar problems elsewhere in the academy. She leaned forward, her expression serious. I'd like you to consider taking on additional responsibilities here at the academy. We need instructors who understand that respect and accuracy are more important than species prejudice. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the offer. He had come to the academy seeking a quiet life away from conflict, but it seemed conflict had found him anyway. On the other hand, maybe that was exactly why he was needed here. I'll think about it, he said finally. Please do. And, Mr. Chen? Administrator Velterra smiled slightly. Samuel Morrison would be proud of how you defended his grandson today. 3 days had passed since the incident in the maintenance bay, and the academy was buzzing with rumors and speculation. Students whispered in corridors about the human who had stood up to a Zephyrian professor, and instructors debated the implications of the suspension in faculty lounges. Marcus found himself at the center of attention he never wanted. Jake Morrison sat in the medical bay, a healing patch covering the bruise on his cheek. Dr. HFY, a gentle Madaran with tentacle-like appendages and healing abilities, had been monitoring his recovery both physical and emotional. The bruise would fade within days, but the psychological impact was taking longer to address. How are you feeling today, Jake? Dr. HFY asked, her voice carrying the soothing harmonics that her species was known for. Better, I think, Jake replied, though his voice still carried uncertainty. Mr. Chen visited yesterday. He brought me some reading material about my grandfather's service. The doctor made a note on her medical pad. And, how does that make you feel? Jake was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the academy's training grounds. Proud, mostly. But, also confused. If my grandfather was such a hero, why did Professor Kethvar react like that? Fear, said a new voice from the doorway. They turned to see Marcus entering the medical bay, carrying a datapad and what appeared to be a small wrapped package. People fear what challenges their worldview. Dr. HFY nodded to Marcus respectfully. Mr. Chen. Jake was just discussing his feelings about recent events. Marcus pulled up a chair next to Jake's medical bed. Mind if I sit? I have something I think you should see. Jake nodded eagerly. Marcus activated his datapad and showed him a message that had arrived that morning. This came through official channels, Marcus explained. It's from the Imperial Military Museum on Zephyr Prime. Jake read the message aloud, his voice growing stronger with each word. To Jake Morrison, descendant of the honored Samuel Morrison. The Imperial Museum requests permission to interview you regarding your grandfather's service with the Elite Guard. We are preparing a new exhibition about cross-species military cooperation and would value your family's perspective. Jake looked up at Marcus with wide eyes.
They want to interview me?
Not just them, Marcus said, scrolling through more messages on his pad. The Earth Defense Corps Historical Society, the Galactic Military Academy, and 3 different universities studying interspecies relations.
It seems your grandfather's story is more significant than even he might have realized. Dr. HFY observed the change in Jake's demeanor with professional interest.
This appears to be having a positive effect on his recovery. Marcus unwrapped the package he had brought and handed it to Jake. Inside was a carefully preserved military patch, the emblem of the Imperial Elite Guard Training Division.
Where did you get this? Jake asked, handling the patch with reverence.
From your grandfather's service record, Marcus explained.
The Academy archives had a complete file, including personal effects that were donated when he passed away. Administrator Velterra authorized me to return them to family.
Jake's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pride rather than pain.
I wish I could have met him. My mom never talked much about his military service. She always said it was too painful. War often is, Marcus agreed.
But what your grandfather did wasn't about war. It was about bringing different species together, teaching them to trust each other's abilities.
That's something worth being proud of. Dr. Thys made another note on her medical pad.
Jake, I believe you're ready to return to classes if you feel up to it.
Jake nodded firmly. I am. I want to get back to learning.
As they prepared to leave the medical bay, Marcus's communicator chimed with an urgent message. He read it quickly, his expression growing serious.
What is it? Jake asked. Administrator Velterra wants to see me immediately, Marcus replied. Something about new developments in your case.
They made their way to the administrative section of the academy, where they found unusual activity. Several official-looking individuals in military uniforms were present, along with what appeared to be news reporters from various galactic media outlets.
Administrator Velterra met them at the entrance to her office. Mr. Chen, perfect timing. We have some unexpected visitors.
Inside the office, a distinguished Zephyrian in ceremonial military dress stood examining the data about Samuel Morrison.
Unlike Professor Kethvar, this Zephyrian carried himself with quiet dignity and genuine respect. Mr. Chen, Mr.
Morrison, Administrator Velterra said formally, I'd like you to meet General Kethzara, current commander of the Zephyrian Honor Guard. The general turned to face them, and Jake noticed immediately that he bore a strong resemblance to Professor Kethvar, similar facial structure and coloring, though his manner was completely different. Mr. Morrison, General Kethzara said, approaching Jake with measured steps.
I owe you and your family an apology.
Jake looked confused.
Sir? Professor Kethvar is my younger brother, the general explained.
When word of this incident reached the military command, I felt obligated to investigate personally.
He gestured toward the data displays showing Samuel Morrison's service record. Your grandfather trained my grandfather, among others.
General Vyth Carr served in the Elite Guard during the Morrison training period and credited the human innovations with saving his life in 3 separate engagements. Marcus watched the exchange with growing understanding.
This was bigger than just Jake's situation or even Professor Kethvar's prejudice. General Kethzara continued.
My brother acted out of ignorance and prejudice that brings shame to our family name. More importantly, he dishonored the memory of those who served alongside your grandfather. The general reached into his uniform and withdrew a small metal case.
This belonged to my grandfather.
It was awarded to him upon completion of Samuel Morrison's advanced training program. He always said it was the most valuable decoration he ever received, not because of its material worth, but because of what it represented. He opened the case to reveal a medal Jake had never seen before, a symbol combining Earth and Zephyrian military emblems in a design that spoke of cooperation and mutual respect.
I cannot undo my brother's actions, General Kethzara said, offering the medal to Jake.
But I can ensure that the truth about your grandfather's service is properly recognized.
Jake accepted the medal with shaking hands. I don't understand. Why would your grandfather give this to me?
Because, the general replied, your grandfather earned it by doing something no one thought possible. He made the elite guard better than they ever dreamed they could be. Not through force or intimidation, but through patience, skill, and respect. Administrator Velterra stepped forward. General Kefzara has also brought a proposal that I believe you should hear. The general nodded. The Zephyrian Military Command would like to establish an exchange program with Earth's technical academies. We want to recreate the kind of cross-species cooperation that your grandfather pioneered. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's quite a significant change in policy. It's a long overdue change, the general admitted. My people have allowed pride to blind us to the value of what others can offer. Your grandfather proved 2 centuries ago that humans have unique insights into equipment maintenance and repair. We've been too stubborn to acknowledge it. Jake looked at the medal in his hands, then at Marcus. What does this mean for me? It means, Administrator Velterra said with a smile, that you have some decisions to make about your future. The Zephyrian Academy of Military Sciences has offered you a full scholarship to study advanced engineering. The Earth Defense Corps wants to interview you for their officer candidate program. And, the Imperial Museum wants to hire you as a consultant for their new exhibition. Jake's head spun with the possibilities. 3 days ago, he had been just another student struggling with plasma conduit alignment. Now, the galaxy seemed to be opening up before him. I need time to think, Jake said quietly. Of course, General Kefzara replied. But, know this, whatever path you choose, you'll have the support of the Zephyrian military. It's the least we can do to honor your grandfather's legacy. As the meeting concluded, Marcus found himself walking with Jake through the Academy's gardens. The young man was clearly overwhelmed by the sudden attention and opportunities. Mr. Chen, Jake said finally, what do you think I should do? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. Your grandfather spent his career building bridges between species. He didn't do it for glory or recognition, he did it because he believed that working together made everyone stronger. He stopped walking and turned to face Jake directly. The question isn't what opportunity will benefit you most. The question is how you can best continue what he started. Jake nodded slowly. You think I should take the scholarship to the Zephyrian Academy? I think you should follow your instincts, Marcus replied. But, remember, you'll be representing not just yourself, but your family's legacy and humanity's potential for cooperation. That evening, Marcus returned to his quarters to find another message waiting for him. This one was from Earth Defense Corps Command, bearing the seal of the commanding admiral. The message was brief but significant. Mr. Chen, we understand you become involved in an incident regarding Samuel Morrison's military service. We'd like to discuss your future with the Corps. There are positions available that could use someone with your unique combination of technical skills and diplomatic instincts. Marcus set down his communicator and stared out the window at the Academy's night sky. The stars seemed brighter tonight, full of possibilities he hadn't considered. Like Jake, he had decisions to make about his future. Meanwhile, in his quarters under house arrest, Professor Kethvar sat reading the complete military records of Samuel Morrison. Each entry, each commendation, each innovation described in the files drove home the magnitude of his error. He had not simply been wrong about historical facts, he had been wrong about fundamental questions of respect and worth. A message from his brother, General Kefzara, appeared on his personal communicator. Brother, you have brought shame to our family name. But, shame can be transformed into wisdom if you choose to learn from it. The question is whether you will use this experience to become better, or allow it to make you bitter. Professor Kethvar read the message several times before finally responding, I wish to speak with the human boy and his instructor. I have wrongs to make right. The next morning brought news that would change everything for Jake Morrison. Administrator Velterra called an emergency assembly for all students and faculty. The Academy's main auditorium filled quickly as word spread that important announcements were coming. Jake sat with his fellow human students, still wearing the healing patch on his cheek but carrying himself with new confidence. Marcus sat with the faculty, though he noted several empty seats where Zephyrian instructors would normally be. Administrator Velterra took the stage with General Kefzara beside her. Students and faculty, recent events at our academy have highlighted both our failures and our potential for growth. She gestured to a large display screen that showed images from Samuel Morrison's military service, photos of human and Zephyrian soldiers working side by side, technical diagrams showing collaborative innovations, and testimonials from elite Guard members who had trained under Morrison's program. 200 years ago, a human mechanic proved that cooperation transcends species boundaries. He showed that respect for expertise matters more than racial prejudice, and that innovation comes from combining different perspectives. The auditorium was completely silent as she continued. Unfortunately, we allowed that lesson to be forgotten. Yesterday's incident was not just an attack on one student, it was a rejection of everything this academy claims to represent. General Kethzara stepped forward. Therefore, the Zephyrian Military Command is partnering with the Academy to establish new programs that will honor Samuel Morrison's legacy. The announcement that followed would reshape interspecies education throughout the galaxy. The Morrison Exchange Program would bring together students from different species to study collaborative engineering and maintenance. The Samuel Morrison Center for Interspecies Cooperation would fund research into combining different species approaches to problem solving. And, most importantly, mandatory courses in interspecies history would ensure that no student would graduate without understanding the contributions of all galactic civilizations. Jake Morrison would indeed accept the scholarship to the Zephyrian Academy, but, with a modification, he would split his time between Earth and Zephyr Prime, helping to develop the new exchange programs. His grandfather's story would become required reading in military academies across known space. As for Professor Kethvar, he would face formal disciplinary hearings, but his brother's intervention and his own genuine remorse would lead to an unusual sentence. He would be required to teach the new interspecies history courses, starting with an intensive study of Samuel Morrison's contributions to galactic civilization. The seeds of change had been planted, and they would grow into something Samuel Morrison himself might never have imagined possible. 6 months after the incident, the Galactic Academy looked different. New construction was underway for the Samuel Morrison Center for Interspecies Cooperation, and students from dozens of species could be seen working together on projects that would have been impossible before. The changes ran deeper than just new buildings, they had fundamentally altered how the Academy approached education and cooperation. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the new collaborative workshop, watching as a team of human, Zephyrian, and Centaurian students worked together to repair a damaged starship engine. The task that would have taken each species weeks to complete individually was being finished in days through their combined expertise. Torvin, can you adjust the phase alignment while Sarah handles the quantum matrices? Jake called out to the mixed species team. At 18, he had grown into his role as a student leader with remarkable maturity. The Zephyrian student nodded and began making precise adjustments to the engine's power systems while his human partner Sarah managed the more complex quantum calculations. Their Centaurian teammate, whose species excelled at pattern recognition, monitored the entire process for potential problems. Marcus Chen observed from the workshop's observation deck, no longer just a maintenance supervisor but now director of practical engineering education. His promotion had come with the Academy's restructuring, and he had embraced the challenge of developing new teaching methods that emphasized cooperation over competition. Impressive work, came a voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Dr. Samuel Reeves, a representative from the Earth Defense Corps who had been monitoring the Morrison Exchange Program's progress. The students have adapted well, Marcus agreed. Better than some of the faculty, honestly. Dr. Reeves nodded knowingly. That's actually why I'm here. We've been watching the developments at the Academy with great interest. The innovations coming out of these collaborative programs are remarkable. He handed Marcus a datapad containing technical specifications that made Marcus's eyes widen. These are breakthrough designs for next-generation starship systems. The engineering principles combine human intuition, Zephyrian precision, and Centaurian pattern analysis in ways no single species could achieve. Where did these come from? Marcus asked, scrolling through the complex diagrams. Student projects, Dr. Reeves replied with a smile. Teams like the one Jake is leading have been developing these during their regular coursework. They're not trying to make breakthroughs, they're just solving problems the way they've been taught to solve them, together. Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with amazement. The students had internalized the collaborative methods so completely that innovation was becoming natural rather than forced. In the workshop below, Jake's team had successfully completed their engine repair ahead of schedule. The Zephyrian student, Torvin, was explaining to the others how human approaches to quantum matrix management differed from traditional methods. Your grandfather's techniques are still being used, Torvin told Jake. My great-uncle served in the elite guard and learned matrix alignment from Samuel Morrison himself. He always said humans had an instinctive understanding of quantum flow patterns. Sarah, the human team member, looked surprised.
Really? I just thought that was normal engineering.
That's exactly the point, Jake said, understanding dawning in his voice. What seems normal to us might be revolutionary to someone else.
That's why these mixed teams work so well.
Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the Academy's communication system. All students and faculty report to the main auditorium immediately.
Emergency assembly in progress. The workshop emptied quickly as students and instructors made their way to the auditorium.
Marcus joined the crowd, noting the mixture of curiosity and concern on people's faces. Emergency assemblies were rare and usually indicated serious problems.
Administrator Velterra took the stage with an expression that was difficult to read.
Behind her stood several figures that Marcus didn't recognize, beings in formal diplomatic attire from various species. Students and faculty, she began, 6 months ago, our academy faced a crisis that could have destroyed everything we stood for. Instead, it became the catalyst for remarkable change.
She gestured to the diplomatic delegation behind her.
Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Morrison Exchange Program has attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic government. The lead diplomat stepped forward, a tall, graceful being from the Etherian Collective, one of the most advanced civilizations in known space. The Etherians rarely involve themselves in the affairs of younger species, making their presence highly significant. I am Ambassador ZFTHYSS of the Etherian Collective, the diplomat announced in a voice that carried harmonic undertones. We have been observing the developments at this academy with great interest.
A murmur ran through the auditorium. Jake felt his heart rate increase as he wondered what the Etherians wanted.
For millennia, our species has watched younger civilizations struggle with the same problems of cooperation and understanding. Most eventually overcome these challenges, but the process typically takes centuries and often involves significant conflict.
Ambassador ZFTHYSS paused, allowing his words to sink in. What has happened here represents an unprecedented acceleration of interspecies development.
In 6 months, you have achieved breakthroughs in cooperation that should have taken decades. Marcus found himself holding his breath as the ambassador continued. The Etherian Collective has decided to offer the Academy access to advanced knowledge and technologies that we typically reserve for much more mature civilizations.
We believe this Academy has proven ready for such responsibility.
The auditorium erupted in excited whispers and conversations. Access to Etherian technology was beyond anything anyone had dreamed possible. Their science was so advanced that even basic Etherian tools could revolutionize galactic civilization. But the ambassador raised a hand for silence. However, this offer comes with conditions and responsibilities that you must understand. The excitement in the auditorium shifted to careful attention.
First, the knowledge we share must be used only for peaceful cooperation and mutual advancement. Any attempt to weaponize Etherian technology will result in immediate termination of our partnership. Administrator Velterra nodded gravely. Understood, Ambassador. Second, the Academy must expand its programs to include species that have historically been excluded from galactic cooperation.
The Morrison Exchange must become truly universal. This condition sparked more discussion among the students. Some species had been excluded from galactic society due to aggressive tendencies or incompatible biology. Including them would present unprecedented challenges. Third, the ambassador continued, a human must serve as the primary coordinator for these expanded programs. Jake felt every eye in the auditorium turn toward him. The implication was clear, the Etherians wanted him to take on this massive responsibility.
Why a human? Administrator Velterra asked. Ambassador ZFTHYSS smiled, an expression that seemed to carry starlight.
Because humans possess a unique combination of traits that makes them ideal for this role. They have the technical aptitude to understand complex systems, the empathy to work with diverse species, and, most importantly, they lack the ancient prejudices that limit other civilizations. He looked directly at Jake. Young Morrison, your species came to the galactic community recently enough to see all other species as potential partners rather than traditional enemies. You don't carry the burden of centuries-old conflicts and rivalries. Jake stood slowly, feeling the weight of expectation from hundreds of eyes. Ambassador, I'm honored by your confidence, but I'm just a student.
I don't have the experience for something this important. Experience can be gained, the ambassador replied. But, the right perspective is far more rare and valuable. Dr. Reeves, who had been standing at the back of the auditorium, stepped forward. If I may, Ambassador, the Earth Defense Corps would be honored to support Mr. Morrison in this endeavor. We can provide whatever resources and personnel he needs. General Kathzara, who had arrived during the announcement, also stepped forward. The Zephyrian military pledges our full cooperation as well. My people owe a great debt to the Morrison family. Marcus watched as representatives from various species began voicing their support. The coalition forming around Jake represented something unprecedented in galactic politics, true multi-species cooperation at the highest levels. But Jake himself looked overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being proposed. Marcus made his way through the crowd to reach the student. Jake, he said quietly, this is what your grandfather would have wanted. He started something small that grew into something amazing. Now you have the chance to take it even further. Jake nodded slowly. But what if I fail? What if I can't handle the responsibility? Then, you'll learn from your mistakes and do better, Marcus replied. That's what humans do, we adapt and improve. Ambassador ZFTHYSS approached them. Mr. Morrison, we understand this is a difficult decision. Perhaps it would help to see what's possible. He activated a small device that projected a holographic display showing star charts and technological specifications. These are just a few of the innovations that could emerge from expanded interspecies cooperation. Medical techniques that could extend lifespans across all species. Environmental technologies that could restore damaged worlds. Transportation systems that could make interstellar travel as common as planetary travel is today. The projections were breathtaking in their scope and implications. Jake could see not just technological advancement, but the potential for true galactic unity. There's something else you should know, the ambassador added. We've been monitoring communications from various species governments. Word of the Morrison exchange program has spread far beyond this academy. Several aggressive species that have been isolated from galactic society have expressed interest in joining these programs. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Aggressive species? The Varkonian Empire, for instance. They've been excluded from galactic cooperation for over a century due to their warlike nature. But, their leadership has been observing the Academy's programs and believes that cooperation might serve them better than conquest. The implications were staggering. If truly aggressive species could be brought into peaceful cooperation, it would reshape the entire galactic political landscape. Jake looked around the auditorium at the faces watching him expectantly: human, Zephyrian, Centaurian, and now Etherian. Each species brought unique strengths and perspectives, but also challenges and complications. I'll do it, he said finally, his voice carrying more confidence than he felt. But I'll need help from everyone here. The auditorium erupted in cheers and applause that seemed to shake the building's foundations. Marcus felt a surge of pride and hope as he watched the young man accept responsibility that would affect the entire galaxy. Ambassador ZFTHYSS smiled again. Excellent. We'll begin by establishing an advanced research facility here at the Academy. Our engineers will work with your teams to develop new technologies and teaching methods. Over the following hours, plans began taking shape with remarkable speed. The Academy would be expanded to accommodate thousands of new students from dozens of species. Advanced laboratories would be built to house Etherian technology. Exchange programs would be established with civilizations that had never before participated in galactic cooperation. Jake found himself at the center of it all, coordinating between species representatives and helping to design programs that would bring together beings who had been enemies for millennia. The magnitude of the task was overwhelming, but he discovered that breaking it down into smaller, manageable pieces made it seem possible. That evening, as the diplomatic meetings finally ended, Jake walked through the Academy's gardens with Marcus. The older man had been his anchor throughout the day, providing steady guidance when the discussions became too complex or heated. Mr. Chen, Jake said finally, I still can't believe this is really happening. Marcus chuckled. Your grandfather probably felt the same way when he first started training Zephyrian soldiers. Sometimes the biggest changes begin with the smallest steps. They paused at a memorial that had been erected to honor Samuel Morrison and other pioneers of interspecies cooperation.
The monument was simple but elegant, featuring symbols from dozens of different civilizations arranged in a pattern that suggested unity rather than dominance.
"Do you really think we can make this work?" Jake asked. "Bringing together species that have been fighting for centuries?"
Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question carefully.
"I think humans have an advantage that we don't always recognize.
We're new enough to this galactic community that we don't have preconceptions about who can and can't work together." He gestured toward the academy buildings, where lights still burned in many windows as students from various species worked on projects together.
"Look what you've already accomplished here. 6 months ago, Zephyrian students wouldn't even talk to humans. Now they're creating revolutionary technologies together." Jake nodded, feeling some of his uncertainty fade. "The Etherians seem to think we can handle even bigger challenges."
"The Etherians have been watching galactic civilizations for thousands of years," Marcus replied. "If they think we're ready for this responsibility, maybe we should trust their judgment." As they walked back toward the dormitories, Jake noticed something that made him smile. In the collaborative workshop, lights were still on despite the late hour. Through the windows, he could see students from multiple species working on what appeared to be modifications to the Etherian technology they had been given access to. The future was beginning to take shape, and it looked like nothing anyone had ever imagined possible. The Morrison exchange program had grown from a response to prejudice and ignorance into something that could unite the entire galaxy in peaceful cooperation. Jake Morrison, the student who had been struck for honoring his grandfather's memory, was about to become one of the most important figures in galactic history. And it all started because a human mechanic had stood up for what was right. 2 years had passed since the Etherians first offered their partnership to the Academy. The campus had transformed beyond recognition, sprawling across 3 continental landmasses and extending into orbital platforms that housed the most advanced research facilities in known space. Students and faculty from over 200 species worked together daily, creating innovations that were reshaping galactic civilization. Jake Morrison, now 20 years old, stood in the central command center of the Morrison complex, watching real-time displays that showed cooperative projects spanning dozens of star systems. What had begun as a simple exchange program had evolved into the largest peaceful alliance in galactic history. "Jake, we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim," announced Dr. Thys, who had become his chief advisor for psychological and diplomatic matters.
"The Varkonian delegation is requesting emergency mediation." Jake nodded, unsurprised by the request.
The Varkonians had been the most challenging species to integrate into the cooperative framework. Their entire culture was built around concepts of strength through conquest, making peaceful collaboration feel like weakness to many of their people. "What's the issue this time?" he asked, pulling up the relevant files on his personal display.
"Internal conflict," Dr. Thys explained.
"The younger Varkonians who have participated in our programs are advocating for permanent adoption of cooperative principles. The traditional military leadership sees this as cultural betrayal."
Jake studied the report streaming in from Varkonian space.
Protests were erupting across their empire as generations of warriors struggled to reconcile their aggressive heritage with the benefits they had observed from peaceful cooperation.
"Recommendations?" Jake asked. "Ambassador Thys suggests direct intervention," Dr. Thys replied.
"The Etherians believe we have a responsibility to support species transitions, even when they become difficult." Jake was quiet for a moment, weighing options and consequences. Over the past 2 years, he had learned that leadership often meant making decisions with incomplete information and accepting responsibility for unforeseen outcomes.
"Contact General Kefzara and Admiral Chen," he said finally. "We're going to need military escort if we're entering Varkonian space during civil unrest."
Admiral Chen was Marcus, who had accepted a commission with the new Interspecies Cooperative Defense Force when it became clear that peaceful cooperation sometimes required the credible threat of defensive action. His understanding of both human intuition and alien perspectives had made him invaluable in negotiations with species that respected strength. Within hours, a diplomatic fleet was assembled that would have been impossible to imagine just 3 years earlier. The lead vessel was an Etherian science ship equipped with technology beyond most species' comprehension. Escorting it were Zephyrian honor guard cruisers, human engineering vessels, and even a converted Centaurian exploration craft filled with specialists in conflict resolution. Jake stood on the bridge of the Etherian vessel as they entered Varkonian space, accompanied by Ambassador Thys and Admiral Chen. The display showed a star system in chaos, military fleets facing off against each other, civilian transports fleeing combat zones, and space stations broadcasting conflicting messages about the future of Varkonian civilization.
This is impressive, even by Varkonian standards, Admiral Chen observed grimly. Civil wars usually don't escalate this quickly. Ambassador ZFTHYSS studied the tactical displays with his characteristic calm. The conflict represents a fundamental philosophical shift that has been building for decades. Our program simply accelerated the timeline.
Jake opened a communication channel to all Varkonian vessels and installations in the system. His image appeared on screens throughout the fleet, carrying a message that would be translated into dozens of dialects. This is Jake Morrison of the Interspecies Cooperative Alliance. I'm requesting immediate ceasefire and permission to mediate this conflict. The response was immediate and chaotic. Multiple voices began transmitting simultaneously, some welcoming the intervention, others denouncing it as foreign interference, and still others demanding explanations for human involvement in Varkonian affairs. Cut through the noise, Admiral Chen suggested. Find whoever's actually in charge and talk to them directly. Jake nodded and instructed the communications officer to filter the signals. Within minutes, they had identified the primary military commanders on both sides of the conflict, traditional war leader Supreme General Varkith and progressive commander Admiral Vilos, who had participated in academy exchange programs. This is a private matter, Supreme General Varkith declared when Jake's communication reached him.
The Varkonian Empire does not require assistance from weaker species. Admiral Philos's response was markedly different. Jake Morrison, we welcome your intervention.
The traditional leadership refuses to acknowledge what our young warriors have learned through cooperative training.
Jake found himself in the familiar position of bridging incompatible worldviews. Supreme General Varkith, I understand your concerns about foreign interference.
But the conflict in your system is affecting trade routes and civilian populations across 3 sectors.
The Academy has a responsibility to address threats to galactic stability. You threaten us with force? Varkith demanded.
I offer you wisdom, Jake replied calmly. The same wisdom that transformed the human students beating into the most successful cooperation program in galactic history. This reference caught Varkith's attention. Varkonians respected strength, but they also valued stories of transformation through conflict.
Jake continued. Supreme General, your people are not weak for learning from others.
They are becoming stronger by combining Varkonian courage with the knowledge and techniques of other species.
Explain, Varkith said simply. Jake activated a holographic display showing battle simulations. These scenarios were developed by mixed species teams including Varkonian warriors. Traditional Varkonian tactics against modern threats.
The simulations showed Varkonian forces using conventional strategies against enemies employing technologies and methods from multiple species.
The results were devastating defeats that would have shocked any military leader.
Now observe the same scenarios using cooperative techniques developed at the Academy. The second set of simulations showed Varkonian forces enhanced with Etherian shielding, human engineering modifications, and Zephyrian precision targeting. The same enemies that had crushed traditional forces were defeated decisively.
Supreme General Varkith was silent for several minutes as he studied the data. Finally, he spoke. These results are accurate?
Verified by independent testing across multiple scenarios, Admiral Chen confirmed.
General, cooperation doesn't make your people weak. It makes them unbeatable. I require proof, Varkith declared. Physical demonstration, not computer simulations. Jake exchanged glances with his advisors.
Physical demonstrations of military capability were dangerous during tense situations, but refusing Varkith's request would likely escalate the conflict.
What kind of demonstration? Jake asked. Combat trial, Varkith replied immediately.
Traditional Varkonian force against your cooperative methods.
If your techniques prove superior, the traditional leadership will consider adopting them.
Admiral Chen shook his head slightly, but Jake had already made his decision.
Accepted. What are the terms? Single ship engagement, Varkith proposed. Our finest traditional cruiser against your best cooperative design. Non-lethal weapons only, but full tactical engagement. Jake looked at Ambassador ZFTHYSS, who nodded almost imperceptibly.
The Etherian had been expecting this development.
We accept, Jake announced. But we choose our own ship and crew. Naturally, Varkith agreed. When can you be ready?
Give us 6 hours to prepare, Jake replied, already formulating plans. The communication ended, leaving Jake alone with his advisors on the Etherian bridge.
Admiral Chen was the first to speak. Jake, you realize you just committed us to a combat engagement with one of the most warlike species in the galaxy?
I committed us to a demonstration, Jake corrected.
But, you're right about the risks. Ambassador ZFTHYSS leaned forward.
The Academy has several vessels that incorporate cooperative design principles.
Which do you intend to use?
Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking through options and consequences.
None of them, he said finally. We're going to build one.
Both advisors stared at him.
In 6 hours? Admiral Chen asked.
We have the components, Jake explained. The engineering vessel carries modular systems designed for rapid assembly. We can combine human engineering, Zephyrian weapons systems, Etherian shielding, and Centaurian sensors into a custom configuration.
He activated his communicator and began issuing orders to the fleet.
All vessels, prepare for cooperative construction project.
Priority authorization Morrison 7. The next 6 hours transformed the space around the diplomatic fleet into a massive construction site.
Engineering teams from multiple species worked with unprecedented coordination, combining technologies and techniques that had never been integrated before. Jake found himself everywhere at once, coordinating between teams who spoke different languages and thought in completely different frameworks.
A Zephyrian weapons specialist needed to understand how human intuitive targeting worked with Etherian energy systems.
Centaurian sensor operators had to integrate their pattern recognition capabilities with human tactical analysis software.
This is impossible, Admiral Chen muttered as he watched a human engineer explain quantum mechanics to a Varkonian metallurgy expert.
They're trying to create technologies that don't exist using principles that barely work individually.
That's exactly the point, Jake replied. We're not just demonstrating superior tactics.
We're showing them what becomes possible when different species combine their unique strengths.
The ship that emerged from this frantic cooperation looked unlike anything in galactic military history. Its hull combined Varkonian armor techniques with Etherian adaptive shielding. The weapons systems merged Zephyrian precision with human flexibility and Etherian power management. Sensors incorporated Centaurian pattern recognition with human intuitive analysis protocols. Does it actually work? Admiral Chen asked as final systems came online.
Only one way to find out, Jake replied, taking his position in the command chair of the hybrid vessel. The crew was as diverse as the ship itself, representatives from every major species in the cooperative alliance, working together in roles their ancestors would have considered impossible. Jake's second-in-command was a young Varkonian officer named Thorax who had participated in academy programs and believed deeply in cooperative principles.
All stations report ready, Thorax announced as they moved into position for the combat trial.
The Varkonian traditional cruiser was an impressive sight, 2 kilometers of angular armor and weapons designed for close-range assault. It represented centuries of Varkonian military doctrine focused on overwhelming enemy forces through superior firepower and aggressive tactics. Supreme General Varkith's voice came through the communication system.
Traditional cruiser Storm of Victory is ready for engagement. Are your cooperative methods prepared for actual combat?
Ready as we'll ever be, Jake replied.
He activated internal communications to address his mixed-species crew. Remember, this isn't about winning or losing.
It's about demonstrating that cooperation creates possibilities that no single species can achieve alone. The engagement began with the Storm of Victory following classic Varkonian tactics, a direct assault designed to overwhelm the enemy through concentrated firepower. It was an approach that had worked successfully for millennia against conventional opponents. But Jake's hybrid vessel didn't respond conventionally. Human intuition guided the ship through evasive patterns that confused traditional targeting systems.
Etherian adaptive shielding deflected attacks while Zephyrian precision weapons struck at vulnerable points identified by Centaurian pattern analysis.
They're not fighting like any species we know, reported the Storm of Victory's tactical officer. Because they're not fighting like a single species, Supreme General Varkith replied, beginning to understand what he was witnessing.
They're fighting like something new.
The engagement continued for over an hour, with the hybrid vessel consistently outmaneuvering and outgunning the traditional cruiser without inflicting serious damage. Every tactical advantage that Varkonian doctrine provided was countered by innovations that emerged from cooperative thinking. Finally, Jake opened a communication channel to the storm of victory. Supreme General, we could continue this demonstration for hours, but I think the point has been made. Varkitha's response came after a long pause. Yes. The point has been made very clearly. The Supreme General ordered his forces to stand down and requested permission to come aboard the hybrid vessel. When he materialized in the transporter bay, his expression was one of amazement rather than defeat. This ship should not exist, he said bluntly as Jake gave him a tour of the integrated systems. The technologies should be incompatible. The crew should be unable to coordinate effectively. You're right on all counts, Jake agreed. 6 months ago, this would have been impossible. But cooperation changes what's possible. Varkith studied the mixed species crew working together with seamless efficiency. Your Varkonian officer, Thorax. He fights better than our traditional warriors. He fights differently, Jake corrected. Not better or worse, but with advantages that come from understanding multiple approaches to combat. The Supreme General was quiet for several minutes as they completed the tour. Finally, he spoke again. The young warriors who want to adopt cooperative methods, they are not betraying Varkonian culture? They're expanding it, Jake replied. Taking everything that makes Varkonians strong and adding new strengths that other species can teach them. Supreme General Varkith nodded slowly. I will need time to discuss this with the traditional leadership. But I believe you have shown us a path forward that honors our heritage while embracing new possibilities. The Varkonian Civil War ended not with victory for either side, but with a new understanding of what strength could mean. Traditional warriors began participating in academy programs, discovering that cooperation enhanced rather than diminished their capabilities. Jake watched from the bridge of the hybrid vessel as Varkonian fleets began standing down across the system. Admiral Chin joined him, looking out at space that had been filled with conflict just hours before. Think it will hold? Chen asked. Change is never easy, Jake replied. But once people see what's possible through cooperation, it's hard to go back to the old ways. Ambassador ZFTHYSS appeared beside them, his Etherean features expressing something like satisfaction. The Cooperative Alliance now includes over 300 species, with more requesting membership every month. What began as a response to prejudice and ignorance has become the foundation for galactic unity. Jake nodded, thinking about how far they had come since that day in the maintenance bay when Professor Kethvar struck him for honoring his grandfather's memory. My grandfather taught alien warriors how to maintain their equipment. Now his legacy has taught the galaxy how to maintain peace. The hybrid vessel began its journey back to the Academy, carrying representatives from multiple species who would help design the next generation of cooperative programs. In its wake, the Varkonian system began the complex process of transforming a warrior culture into something that honored both courage and cooperation. And, across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds and space stations, students and teachers continued the work that Samuel Morrison had begun 2 centuries earlier, proving that the greatest strength came not from dominance, but from understanding and working together despite differences. The Morrison Exchange Program had become the Morrison Alliance, and the Alliance was becoming the foundation for a new era of galactic civilization. All because a human mechanic had stood up for what was right, and his grandson had learned to turn conflict into cooperation. The future stretched ahead, full of challenges and possibilities that would require the combined wisdom of every species in the galaxy to navigate successfully. But, for the first time in galactic history, they would face those challenges together.